Well, hello, hockey fans. Welcome back after a 1 week, little mini vacation. We're back here on the Hockey Writers Live. It is already June the 10th, 2021. I am your host, Mark Scheig. And if you look behind me, the background is a little bit different. You're not seeing the background of my house. You are seeing the walls of a gym, literally. I am coming to you from the Erie Showcase where the junior hockey players are getting together for a couple weeks here. They're going to be wrapping up this weekend, and I figure, let's record from here. It's be a little bit different. And since we're talking about juniors and stuff like that, I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to bring on one of my favorite people when it comes to not only covering prospects, but when it comes to the World Championships, the OHL Draft, prospects in general. I call him an encyclopedia. It's the first time I've ever admitted that to him, but that's what he really is. It's Steven Ellis from the Hockey News. Hello, Steven.
Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate you joining us. So first and foremost, how are you doing after covering the World Championships?
Well, first off, congrats on the check mark on Twitter. That's pretty cool.
Thank you. Don't know how it happened, but
I'm still waiting for mine. I'm still waiting for mine. But World Championships, 64 games. It's quite a bit, especially those 5 a.m. games on like the Tuesdays and the Saturdays and Sundays. So there's a lot of no sleep, but it was a lot of fun. I've been covering that tournament since about 2013. So it's been kind of fun each year to kind of just see how the tournament keeps evolving. And this was by far the most unpredictable one I've ever seen. So that was a lot of fun.
We're going to jump into that in a little bit, but I just wonder, for your position where you cover prospects and other things like that, how different was this year for you trying, with limited games, and how are you able to fill the time?
Yeah, this was a year where it's obviously a lot different, not being able to go to rinks. And like I would go to between minor midget hockey, the NHL, OHL, AHL, I'd go to the rinks sometimes 4 or 5 times a week. So to not have gone to any hockey game since March 10th, 2020 is crazy. It was the last Leafs preseason or last Leafs regular season game before the pandemic began. So it's been a long time. So I've always kind of had to use video to kind of follow prospects and stuff. But this year it's been nice to kind of dig into some other tools like Instat and things like that to kind of really understand what's going on in other leagues where I can't really follow all the time. And but it's been a challenge. I just want to go back to the rink. The OHL draft was by far one of the hardest ones I've ever had to follow, where I'll talk to 5 or 6 OHL GMs and I would ask for their top 10s and they'd give me completely different top 10s that didn't resemble each other at all. And it's like, I've never seen that before. So overall, kind of just around all levels, it was a weird year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the good news though, being here in Erie is that they played all the games. There's been no COVID positive. They test virtually every day. I know the players right now go to the pharmacy to do it. On Friday, they're going to bring somebody in here. There's hope at the end of the tunnel. We've been able to do face-to-face interviews. It's just been a nice, smoothly sailing situation here. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come for you and for everyone else that's just looking forward to getting back to a rink. I think it's coming. This tournament should show everybody, especially in Ontario, that if you do the right thing and put the right kind of rules in place, that we can have a regular OHL season and then some. So hopefully that's coming.
I'm confident the season's going to work as it is. Like I cover the Canadian NASCAR series too, and it's like that's another thing that's been severely impacted. Where that's one where it's not like the 20 roster players and a couple coaches on each side. It's like each team's got 10 people affiliated with them, and it's like that makes it hard to do that. Where everyone's got to work really close. It's really hot outside, and a lot of things like that. So that's tough, but the fact that this tournament's going on here, it's like that's a good sign that we're going to get closer to this. And obviously some restrictions are starting to finally be lifted here in Ontario, and we're hoping that really kind of turns a corner. We're still seeing some rookie camps at the junior A level that are getting canceled and things like that, but it looks like maybe we're not too far away at this point.
In 3 months, hopefully, when training camps get underway, supposedly, that'll seal the deal. So let's hope that it happens. Steven Ellis from the Hockey News joining us here, and dive into the World Championships. My God, Canada, they were 0-3. What in the world happened to turn that thing around to win the whole thing?
I picked them to win the championship, and I actually picked Finland to come second and USA to come third. So it was kind of cool, and that actually happened the way it was. But with Canada, it's like that's a team that had 17 NHL players. And if you look at the 3 teams they played to start the tournament, being Latvia, USA, and Germany, Canada had more NHL players than all 3 of those teams combined. And by that alone, you think, okay, this team's got to be good. And obviously in international tournaments, it's a little different. You got the Latvian team, they play together all year long in the KHL. The German team, a lot of these guys have played internationally together for a decade. And some of them had already played in a couple of pre-tournament games and exhibition games. Canada went to the very first game with a group that had basically been together for a few days and only had hit the ice the first time in 3 days before the first game. So because of that, they were in a situation where they kind of had to really adjust quickly. And from talking to Gerard Gallant after the first game, he seemed really confident. It's like, yeah, we just lost to Latvia. This loss will suck. But, we were together for a few days. Like, we expected this to be a tough game. And Latvia was playing in front of nobody, unfortunately, but it was still a home game. So it meant a lot. And they had a huge party that night, the Latvians. So that was really cool. But for Canada, this was a tournament where they were expected to win, started off rocky, but once Andrew Mangiapane came into the lineup, all of a sudden things really changed. Darcy Kemper started to figure out, because he played terrible this first few games. And once they started to figure it out, it's like, this team's got the talent to win it. And why not us, essentially, was their attitude after their win against Norway and then going to Kazakhstan, Italy, and then having to play Finland. They had to basically be perfect near the end, and they were about as close as possible. They ended up winning. It's funny, in the round robin, they actually barely led any of the games they played in, but they scored when it mattered.
How much credit does Gerard Gallant deserve for the overall situation, and then how well does it bode for him landing an NHL coaching gig next season?
I'd be shocked if he's not coaching in the NHL next year. And obviously, there's a lot of teams that have been rumored to be of interest. The New York Rangers, of course, Chris Drury got a great first glance of what the coaching situation there, and there are other teams that will want him. This is a guy that should have never been let go in the first place. I would love to see him coach Team Canada if he doesn't get picked up. I love to for the Olympics. I would love to see that, no matter whether it's NHL players or not. I want him to be coaching that team because I think he's an outstanding coach. He seemed so confident. The players were always so quick to compliment him. I think Owen Power played a terrible first game, and instead of benching him, which they could have easily done, there were a lot of teams that were only using sixth defense, or they would use their eighth guy instead and sit that other guy. Owen Power never sat. He actually played more each game, to the point where he's playing 25, 27 minutes a game. And that type of faith in him and the ability to coach him, I think, was so important. So I thought he did a great job with that team, where I think the underdog tale is something that was good for TV, but not based in reality when it came to Team Canada. But they, in the end, I think he did a good job of really shaping that group when it needed to be, because they almost lost to Norway. They had a 2-0 lead, and then it was 2-2. And if they lost that game, it didn't matter what they did the rest of the way; they were done. And that's a kind of crazy thing. But he was able to get that team to really calm down, relax, and play good hockey.
Did Owen Power do enough to solidify the number one spot in your mind?
100%. This is a guy that I think, from talking to different scouts and coaches before, they said he's our number one. And when Bob McKenzie put out his ranking and saying all the coaches or all of the GMs he talked to said he's number one, that seems to be what it really is the case from people that I've talked to. And I think he played some of the best hockey we've ever seen him play. I've followed him since he was a minor Bantam player, and this guy just continues to get better all the time. And this is a guy that had never played on big ice, never played against men players at the professional level, and didn't seem to bother him after that first game. I think this guy really proved it.
Matty Beniers as well is somebody that's going to get a lot of attention. How impressive was he to you, and do you see him maybe even going as high as number two?
I don't know if I'd put him number two. I think this is a guy that he's got a lot of talent, but he's also someone who he did get injured in the tournament. He hurt his ankle, and it was not pretty, which is funny because the next game after that, he actually skated in the warm-ups. It's like, could this guy actually play? And he didn't end up getting back into the ice, but that's someone who he didn't play a huge role with the team. He didn't play a lot of minutes, but he didn't look out of place either. It seemed like the best chemistry he had was with Brian Boyle. Those two guys really worked well together. And Beniers was someone where I think it took him a bit to figure out how to utilize the extra space on the ice. And once he did, it worked out. His skating was really good. He was taking a lot of shots. He was willing to kind of get in the dirty areas to make those plays. I don't think he's a number two prospect for me, but I do think that this is someone where you look at him and it's like, this guy is going to be a really good forward in the NHL someday. And I feel like he'll probably prove some teams wrong that don't pick him. But it wasn't overly a super strong tournament for him, partly just because they just didn't play him a lot. He did play kind of in the bottom six. And again, there were some games he just didn't get a lot of ice time.
How excited should the Kings be about Cal Peterson's future after seeing him in this tournament?
I've been really pushing Cal Peterson's tires for a few years. I think this is a guy that's just like, he's got an incredible future. You know, he's a little bit of an older goalie. He hasn't really, he's the number one guy in LA, but it's like they haven't really given him full control yet because Jonathan Quick still gets a lot of ice or a lot of starts, I should say. But Cal Peterson was out of his mind good in this tournament. And actually, I had a really big dilemma, either picking him or picking Finland's goalie as the top goalie in the tournament. And in the end, I ended up going the Finnish goalie just because with Peterson, it was just like he didn't go as far, but it's like Peterson played some of the best hockey that we've seen in this tournament. I compared his play to Connor Hellebuck's at this tournament in 2015. Hellebuck that time wasn't a full-time NHL player. He was still a prospect, but he played incredible. He had one of the best tournaments we had seen from a goalie in a long time at that point. And I think Cal Peterson outdid that this year. Now, granted, his team, I think, played better as a group than that team back then, but this was one where he only allowed 3 goals in a game once, and it happened to be the game that Canada ended up winning and moving on. But none of that tournament was his fault. He played near perfect hockey, and I think that the LA Kings got a good goalie from him. It was nice to see what he could do on a winning team and a winning culture, because obviously LA's in a rebuild. It's going to be a few years before he gets to really show what he can do. But this is one where from the start, it was clear the Americans were going to compete, and he took that team to another level. Jake Ottinger played really good hockey too, and full credit to him. He made one of the best saves of the tournament. But in the end, I think Cal Peterson was the guy that really was a difference maker for the Americans.
One more player I just want to ask you about that I don't think ever gets the love that he deserves, because primarily he's been playing on a pretty bad team, but just Conor Brown. Just what is it about him? It just seems like that no matter the circumstance, he steps up, he performs. What did you see from him?
Well, it's funny because when he played in Toronto, he was kind of buried in the lineup. And it's when he went to Ottawa, it's like, okay, this guy's really going to make the Leafs look stupid, right? And that's exactly what he's done. He was on a goal-scoring tear at one point in the season. This tournament was funny. He only had 2 goals, but he had 16 points, and his 14 assists actually were the second most in tournament history. And when you look back, like his performance might not go down as one of the best we've ever seen. I think William Nylander 2 years ago put on one of the best we had seen in the modern era. But in terms of what we saw from Conor Brown, he just he didn't score in the first 3 games in a 10-game tournament. He's only got points in 7 of them, but in those 7 games, it was enough for him to have one of the best tournaments we've seen of a Canadian player in particular. And then assist wise, outstanding. A lot of flack was made about him not making it to the tournament all-star team and the media all-star team. I didn't pick him for the media all-star team for the sole reason is he didn't play very good in the first 2 games. And once Mangiapane came in, that's when things changed. And that's when all of a sudden Brown started putting up points. So that's why I didn't put him to be on the team. I think there were some other guys that were a bit more worthy. And of course, in the end, Conor Brown finished with the most points, but he also got 3 points in the final game where he actually wasn't leading the points by himself heading into that final game. So there's that. But just, wow, that guy could pass the puck. We know he could shoot, but just seeing how he passed the puck in this tournament, he made full use of that big ice. And he also was really dangerous around the net. So really liked what he did there. And Ottawa's got a really good player there.
And give you one last one about the World Championship, just your own, you saw it all. Who really stood out and impressed you? Maybe some names that don't get quite the attention that they deserve.
Well, 2 goalies in particular. Niederberger, the goalie for the Germans, Matthias Niederberger was just man, what a tournament he had. And Matthias Plachta, another guy in Germany, did really well. 2 guys that are basically going to play in the German league for most of their career, but they both were just that team was a lot of fun to watch. I don't know if I've ever seen more block shots in a tournament. And Germany, I know in the NHL, if you're blocking a lot of shots, that means you don't have the puck a lot. In the World Championship, it's a little different because there is different skill levels there, but the Germans, it seemed to work. And those 2 guys were good. I thought Niederberger did just exactly what he needed to do in the German net, because that's a program that continues to develop really good goaltenders. There was the whole thing of Thomas Greiss not being invited due to some political beliefs, and it's okay, well, who's going to be their guy? And Niederberger was great, but then also the guy that really I had never heard of but really impressed me, Nikita Boyarkin, the goalie for Kazakhstan. This is a guy that the coaching staff actually knew nothing about, and he ended up becoming the starting goalie. And if Kazakhstan had made the quarterfinals, I think no doubt he's the goalie of the tournament. It didn't matter what the other goalies did. He was facing 45, 50 shots a game, and like it's like he would like allow 2 goals. Like the guy gave that team the best shot at making the quarterfinals that they've ever had in any level of international hockey, and I think that's really cool.
Absolutely, that's really good stuff. Steven Ellis from the Hockey News joining us here, and just fans reminder. You can catch this and all of our other shows all throughout the Hockey Writers Podcast Network. We are on iHeartRadio now. You're on Apple. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube, Facebook. So make sure you subscribe and like. You will not miss any of these interviews, including this one with Steven. We're going to switch over and talk about the OHL draft now. And you mentioned, I was kind of thinking, this is one of the hardest years to pinpoint because of all the different challenges. And you mentioned the general managers had such a different view of things. So at the end of the day, when you look back at how the draft ended up going, I guess, 1, did anything really surprise you? And 2, who really did well in your sight?
Well, that's the thing. I've been asked a few times since the draft. It's like, who really were the teams that lucked out in the draft and who got really good drafts? I don't know. I don't think anyone really knows, because this is just, you're going off of a lot of cases where you look at a guy like Luke McNamara, who to me was one of the better prospects in the draft, but he grew a lot and he did play really good hockey this year. But what about other guys that grew a lot? And that's a tough thing to really kind of measure, because there were some guys that I saw grew 5 or 6 inches and didn't get a chance to play. So it seems like that's a tough one. In terms of who did well, I think the Sudbury Wolves got to be super happy. I know like that's kind of easy as the number 1 pick, but I don't think anyone expected Quentin Musty to actually go to the OHL. It would seem like he was going to the development program. And for him to go first overall is huge. There was 2 guys that really surprised me. Was one being Noah Cochran, the defenseman who a couple years ago, when I got to see him play, this was someone who like would go end to end 3 times in a game. I think I saw him play a tournament where he actually had 2 hat tricks, and he's a defenseman and he was playing a year round. Like, this guy is such a good player, but I want to say he went in like the 9th round of the draft, because I think it was 9th to Sudbury actually. And that one was weird. It's like the people were saying like, oh, this guy's like maybe not the smartest kid out there, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, unless he's going to the NCAA, this is a guy that when I talked to some scouts, like out of a panel of 5, 3 of them had him going in the top 5. So how did he end up in the 9th round? Some weird ones there, but I know he's a very talented player, and I think we're going to see a lot of him. And then the other one being Owen Davey, a guy who I don't believe got drafted at all, and he was a really good goaltender playing on Elgin Middlesex. And obviously a lot of the tension there was that his goalie partner Taya Curry went, but like Owen Davey was by far, I'd say, the best goalie in this draft, and it looks like he must be going the NCAA route. This year, there's a lot of different things where we don't know where these guys are going to go. There's obviously the hesitancy of even playing the OHL this year. We don't know if the season's going to start on time. And in that case, there are some kids I've talked to who's like, I'm seriously looking at the NCAA. So a lot of challenges where I don't know what to make of this draft. And from what people talk to, it's like, we won't know the impact of this draft for maybe 2-3 years.
And for those that aren't familiar with Quentin Musty's game, like, what is it about him that makes him stand out? And is he comparable to any of the recent number 1s?
It's tough, because I'd say he's way different than Shane Wright. I'd say he's way different than obviously than Ty Nelson being a defenseman. So there's a lot of differences there, but I think with him, he's kind of just a really good complete package. He's got I wish we could see him play with Quentin Byfield, because I think if you had him as the guy that Byfield's passing to, that's exciting. So he's a winger. He's just a really just high offense, high speed guy. He's exactly what you would expect out of a number 1 prospect, just being like everything about his game, that he's got something good to it. There's no real negatives. He's good defensively. His real bread and butter will be putting pucks in the net. He's really dangerous around the net. I got to see him play a couple of years ago in Oakville, Ontario, and just seeing what he was like. I didn't know anything about him. I went in with a specifically like, I don't want to know any of these players beforehand. I want to see who impresses me. And every time I saw him play, this guy just seemed to have the puck on his stick. So really good player that Sudbury really kind of locked in on, because in a normal year, if they didn't have the pandemic, Quentin Byfield's probably there, and he's probably leading this team to a long-term playoff run, and they don't have an option at Quentin Musty. But to get him, that's a really good guy to really put in the stable there.
What do you think the reaction of the league was, or just around the hockey world, when Taya Curry got picked? And then ultimately, is there a scenario where she could end up appearing in a game for Sarnia down the road?
I think it was a really good. And the thing about that was there were definitely people who were scouts, I said, that said like, okay, like she's a really tiny goalie. She's 5'7". Would that really translate? And in reality, no, probably not. But at the same time, she was good enough to be in the conversation. This wasn't just like we're picking her because like it's really good news. Like maybe that's why some teams had interest, but in reality, she deserved to be there. She deserved to be in the conversation all year long. She's one of the better athletic goalies that we saw in this draft. And I'd say like if she was 6'1" at this stage, I think we'd be talking about like a goalie going like pretty early in the draft. But it does sound like she will be probably going the NCAA route. And I do think that is the best bet because you would lose your NCAA status if you played just one game in the OHL. And obviously, smaller goalies don't exactly have a great run in that high level hockey on the men's side. So for her, I think if she goes the NCAA route, from people that I've talked to that know her very well, the one thing keeps coming clear, and it's like she's going to help Canada win the Olympic gold medal multiple times. She's going to be the next star of women's hockey, and I think that's really good to see. So I don't think we're going to see her in the OHL because it does seem like the NCAA is the route that she actually wants to go herself, but also is probably the best for her development. She'll get an opportunity to be a star in the women's hockey league that they have out there, and then before they go to college, and then have a chance to go play professional after there. So a really good talent. Obviously, goalies, I think it's maybe the easier one where women can kind of get into it at a men's level because it's one where it just we see it happen. We see Shannon Zabatos has had opportunities. We've seen other goalies that have played major junior, and she has a chance of being the first one to play in the OHL. While that'd be a great story, I think that she's committed. She plans to go to the NCAA, and I think she'll be a superstar there for sure.
Yeah, and so are we seeing a trend then? Are we going to see more of this as we move forward?
I think so, because that's the thing. A lot of the goalies, or I should say, a lot of women hockey players will stop playing against boys and men at a pretty early age, like even 12, 13, and they'll just kind of go and play their own leagues. And I think in this situation, like maybe they don't. Like the fact that she deserved to be there, and she was a really good goalie. And Elgin Middlesex is a good team, two good goalies there. But for her, I think that's a good stepping stone. It's like this can happen. We know it's like she was talented enough, and there are other goalies and other players that will have a shot. So I do think so. And right now, I got to give props to what the NCAA does put together for women's hockey. It's really competitive hockey, really good opportunities there. You get the college education. And I think the one thing there is teams like Hockey Canada in particular probably need to look at the NCAA a bit more and say, like, when we're playing international tournaments, we got to take some more players from there because there's some really good talent that we have to wait a few extra years before they're ready. And it's like, I don't think that's the right thing. Some of them are ready to go play for the Olympics World Championship team right away. And Taya Curry is going to be there in a few years. And I think that she's a good inspiration for a lot of people.
And one last question for Steven Ellis here. And I don't know how far ahead you look, but is there anybody that we can kind of look forward to OHL draft wise that maybe that we need to pay attention to as a potential number one?
Are we talking for 2022?
22, yeah.
Well, that's actually one where it's funny. I've been working a little bit on that. Given a lot of the guys that I really like, Mitch Haig is one that's going to be really good. A kid out of Oakville, Ontario, but he also plays for the Toronto Junior Canadiens. Very good talent. Kieran Walton, someone who I've become really familiar with in the last couple of days. And I believe he actually used to have his own podcast when he was like, I believe 12 or 13, and his own website where he and a friend would update stats and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. But he's a guy who's 6'5" already. Like, that's pretty impressive. The one story guy, Zane Parrik, which was kind of funny because he got drafted by Owen Sound with 247th overall, but he's not actually eligible till next year. So he'll be one. But the number one prospect I'd have to say probably is Gabriel Frasca from the Mississauga Senators. That's a team where the Senators are just absolutely loaded. Like this Senators team, if I'm correct, I believe they went 56-1-1 in the 2019-20 season, and they've lost 33 games in like the last 5 years or something like that. Like,
that's insane. Like,
incredible numbers, like just unbelievable how good this team is. Like, we're talking, these kids are playing 50, 60 games, 70 games a year. Like, it's not like they're playing 20, 30. Like, they're playing a lot in a lot of tournaments. So these guys have been dominant. And we talked about, or in the past, Don Mills Flyers, that team in a couple of years ago with Brant Clark and Shane Wright, Brent Allman. That's one of the greatest youth teams I think we've ever seen. This Mississauga Senators team might be better.
Oh, wow. Some good stuff there. Steven Ellis, and fans, make sure you follow him. Does incredible work with prospects and a lot more. Follow him at Steven Ellis THN. And by the next time we talk, I expect to see a blue check mark next to your name. We'll see if that happens or not.
I'm hoping so. I applied 8 days ago, so you never know.
And the word is that they're taking a while to do this as well. So all the best to you, Steven. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us on the Hockey Writers Live.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And stay tuned, fans. We are going to have a part 2 this week. We're going to talk about the Winnipeg Jets. And boy, as quickly as they knocked out the Oilers, they're gone themselves thanks to Montreal. We're going to talk to our Jets writers, so stay tuned. Part 2 is coming up. All right, hockey fans, welcome back to part 2. This is the Hockey Writers Live. It's June 10th, 2021. I'm your host, Mark Scheig, and we are now to part 2 of our podcast. Or make sure you missed part 1. Make sure you go back and listen. Steven Ellis really dropped some knowledge on us, both on the World Championships, how Canada was able to pull it off, had some really good things to say about some players. And then we talked some OHL draft, the unpredictability, Taya Curry, and just phenomenal. So just make sure that you go back and listen to that when you get a chance. We're going to do something a little bit different this week. Normally this is the time that we have our panel, depending on the topic that we talk about. But this week we have, for the first time, a solo panelist, and we are grateful for that. We have our Winnipeg Jets writer, Courtney Stone, that's going to join us. We got to figure out what happened to the Winnipeg Jets. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for doing this for sure, because I think a lot of people in the hockey world are just still trying to figure out, the Jets go 4-0 against the Oilers. And, Montreal, I know they had a nice comeback against the Leafs, but who saw 4 in a row coming against that deep of a team in the Jets? So I guess just to start off with, in any universe, did you see anything like this coming?
Absolutely not. I mean, round 1, for sure, no one saw that coming. And then round 2 comes and the complete opposite happens. Like the sweepers got swept, and I don't think anyone really saw it coming. They looked so strong against the Oilers. Their defense was so strong. Their offense was so strong. They did such a great job at shutting down 2 of the top players in the entire league, Draisaitl and McDavid. So coming into the series with the Habs, the fact that they just got literally creamed by them was so shocking. And while you're watching the games, you could definitely see a sweep was coming, because it was just so slow. They looked like they lost all their confidence. And by the end of the series, I was not surprised they got swept. But coming into it, I thought they would completely dominate the Habs, just because their defense and offense was so strong. And I didn't think the Habs' depth was quite there. I thought the Jets would really take it all the way. And obviously, myself, along with many others, was wrong.
Courtney, did the Jets go into this unprepared to take on the kind of style that Montreal presented? You mentioned kind of slow down, really focus on physicality, on defense. Did that feel like an unprepared hockey team to you?
I think so. I don't know if the team itself and the coaching staff were honestly expecting them to take it to round 2, because like many hockey fans, everyone thought the Oilers were really going to take it. And yeah, you're going to prepare your team as much as possible, but maybe they put all of their focus into beating the Oilers, that by the time round 2 came around so quickly, they really didn't have enough time to shift gears and prepare the way they should have to face the Habs, which are a different team. You've got to focus your efforts on all of the lines down on the Habs. When with the Oilers, it's really that top duo, Draisaitl and McDavid, that you've got to focus on. So maybe they just weren't ready to take on a different type of team when it came to round 2.
So, Courtney, it does make me wonder, looking back at the series, obviously a lot of attention being paid to what Mark Scheig did. And you saw 3 games without him, and that just seemed like that was a team that desperately missed him. But is this a situation where Scheifele's absence had that much? Was that the only reason that they ended up losing this, or were there more factors in play? That's the way I'll put it.
I think it was a big reason why they lost it. I think a lot of people did expect Scheifele's absence to have an impact on the team, but what they might have not taken into consideration was the real domino effect it had down the line, down each line.
Yep.
Because when one of your players is out of the line, all of the others have to get shuffled. And in the playoffs, you don't have that much time to really figure out the chemistry within those new lines because every game counts. And of course, the coach is going to shuffle things around. And by shuffling these lines around, do you really have enough time to get to know the people you're playing with and learn their playing style? So I think it really had a large impact on the team, considering the short amount of time that they had and the domino effect that it really had down all the lines there, especially with Dubois having to step up onto into line one there for Scheifele. And he hasn't been having his best regular season, and obviously in the playoffs didn't produce that well either. So is having him take that place the right move? I don't know. Not sure.
Yeah, we'll get to Dubois in a little bit here for sure. That's a very interesting topic. One more thing about Scheifele I want to throw by you. And so they had the end of season press conferences on Wednesday, and he was asked kind of an interesting question where it ended up saying that, I thought that I should be shut down by Philippe Deneau, but instead I was shut down by the Department of Player Safety. And that's something kind of threw me off guard. I think it threw a lot of people off guard. Did that comment surprise you coming from a leader such as Mark Scheifele?
Yeah, it really did. It seems like to me, watching his remarks, he's still refusing to accept responsibility for his own actions. He's saying that the Department of Player Safety was saying that it was like a blatant hit and charging call, which, I mean, I think watching it clearly was a charge. So I think he needs to accept responsibility for his own actions. Mm-hmm. Because he was explaining too, like, that they were saying he's thinking, oh, so the Department of Player Safety is saying I shouldn't have back checked at all. And I don't think that's their point. He was clearly going after a player there. He could have easily stuck his stick out further to go into the net to try to prevent that puck from going in, but that was not the objective. He was going in for that hit, and that was very clear.
Yeah, well, that was like 180 feet, direct line. And there was a close shot where he could have tried to play it a little bit differently, could have tried to play defense, but instead he put himself in a position to lay out that hit. I mean, it was blatant. It was high. He left his feet. That's textbook charging. I know he might not like the call, but, by the letter of the law, it's the right call. And, that's a surprising comment at the end of the day because, everybody has to have some sort of accountability. I mean, he put himself in a position that he wasn't available for his teammates, especially when they needed him, and it clearly missed him the way that this series ended up working out. Courtney Stone, who's joining us here on our panel, talking Winnipeg Jets with us on the Hockey Writers Live. So let's go to Pierre-Luc Dubois now, Courtney. Watching him in Columbus, he had a great series in the bubble against Toronto where he played the role of number one center. Seemed like that he had the better of the play against Austin Matthews. So when the Jets acquired him, it seemed like that big things were expected because he could slot in as maybe being a number two center. He could play on the wing. Scheifele goes down. You mentioned he goes to the top. I guess the question I want to throw by you is, where did he go? And how concerned should Jets fans be about the prospects of Dubois and his potential future there?
I mean, I don't know where he went. I don't think anybody knows where he went. Yeah. I saw GIFs going around Twitter of people tweeting like literal ghosts. Like no one knew where he was. Right. In the regular season, he only scored 9 goals in 46 games, which is quite surprising. And he just didn't show up in the playoffs. I mean, I guess you could blame it partially on Scheifele being out, because as I was saying, that domino effect it has down the line, down all the lines. Maybe he just couldn't find that chemistry with the people he was playing alongside. He definitely has some areas he needs to improve on, clearly, because he just was not productive on the ice, and you really need a player like that to step up, especially in the playoffs. So I think Jets fans should be concerned. I would not be surprised if maybe they consider trading him, because sometimes your new players just don't mesh with the team properly. There's not much you can do about that, so we'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah, and in covering him, I know that I thought he may have been injured. He came out and admitted that he, outside of regular bumps and bruises, he didn't have an injury. So at least that was good to see. But boy, he's got a really important offseason coming up now. He's got to be able to, he won't have to worry about the trade, because I think, especially getting acclimated to a new team certainly has a little bit to do with it. But then to just no show in the playoffs like that, he's got to really take this offseason and prepare himself and be ready to go. And he admitted as much. It's going to be a huge offseason for him, for the Jets. And, because, they did make it to the second round. I just wonder now, Courtney, in the way that things worked out, what did this series actually show you about the Jets, that this is the thing that they have to address in the offseason now? Are there one or two areas that this series showed you that they have to handle and address in the offseason?
Yeah, there are a couple things. I think one big thing that they have to address is maintaining their confidence and their drive, even when you're losing, because obviously going in the NHL, you're going to lose games, and you can't let that get the best of you. We saw the Jets at the end of the regular season lose 9 of their last 12 games. And they really didn't let that get to them, because they came into round 1 and gave everything they got, and they swept the Oilers. So they had that confidence. And I think heading into round 2 against the Habs, losing game 1 and then losing game 2, and then it starts adding up. They're not used to losing all of a sudden. So they really need to focus on maintaining that confidence and not letting the losses get the best of them. I also think they have to focus on preventing odd man rushes and improving their defense. That did seem to be an issue in the playoffs. With the Oilers, obviously they were able to beat them, so it didn't seem like a huge issue, but there were some odd man rushes from McDavid and Draisaitl throughout the series. As well as in the Habs series, that there was a couple odd man rushes. For example, in game 2, Tyler Toffoli's goal was an odd man rush, and that's just something you really have to prevent. So yeah, those would be 2 areas they could improve on.
Yeah, definitely good stuff there. Just got a couple more for you here, Courtney. So I think we're looking ahead to the offseason. Obviously now, a little more than a month, we're going to have a 32nd team officially. Well, they're already in the league, but they're going to be able to hold their expansion draft. And I just wonder, from a Jets point of view, is there 1 or 2 players that might be on that bubble as, they might be the ones that are going to end up in Seattle?
Yeah, I would say possibly. I know it's a big thing to say, but maybe Dubois.
That'd be huge, boy. I mean, you have the core up front, and is there a match there? I mean, I personally don't think that would happen, but I could see why. I mean, playoffs, he was a complete no-show. Is this what he's going to be moving forward? I mean, I just don't know if you can give him up for nothing, but yeah, I can at least see why the point would be brought up.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm not sure otherwise, but
yeah, it's a constantly changing situation there.
Yeah.
Like Scheifele, Wheeler, Ehlers, Connor, those 4, obviously. Dubois, probably, just because of the way you gave up Patrick Laine, you gave up Jack Roslovic, you're going to probably try to protect him. Maybe a D ultimately, because if they go the 7-3 route, they're probably going to lose a D. And Ville Heinola is on his way to the Jets at some point. I think Logan Stanley had a really good playoff, so that had the 2 goals in game 4. Perhaps that's where it ends up going. Another thing I'll ask you, Courtney, Connor Hellebuyck. You surprised he didn't get a Vezina in the final 3?
Yeah, I am. He was really great in the playoffs. Real steady piece for the Jets. He played great against the Oilers. Played great against the Habs. I don't think they could have blamed that loss on him at all. He was great, and I just think it really it really lay into the hands of the defense. The offense couldn't produce because the Habs defense was surprisingly very strong. So yeah, I'm very surprised. He was a real staple for them throughout the season and in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, and it just kind of it really makes you wonder about the future and just what it might hold. It seemed like the Jets were a team that everyone looked at Toronto as being kind of the cream of the crop, and then they end up Toronto ended up winning the division. But Winnipeg was there all year, and they were one of the teams that could match the center depth. And it just seems like now they've fallen short. So my last question for you for now is, I just wonder about the coaching. And I know that I think it was Scheifele that kind of, again, spoke up and said, you guys have not believed in us for a long time. I think he admitted that today. Do we need to be concerned about Paul Maurice? I know he's been a fixture there. I know he's won cups. I know he's a very good coach, but is this time starting to run out in your opinion, or just what do we make of him in the role with Winnipeg?
I wouldn't say we would have to be concerned about Paul Maurice quite yet.
Okay.
I think his coaching really did show up in round one in that Oilers series. And yeah, they had a rough patch at the end of the season, but they were able, as you said, to maintain their position in the standings throughout the series. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I could completely blame Paul Maurice for their loss entirely. So
he said he's not walking. Okay.
I don't think it's his time to go quite yet. I think he still has some time there.
I think he has a little bit of time too, but the kind of team that they have, they got the goalie, got the forwards for sure when everybody's there. I just wonder, as time moves on, maybe the seat starts to get a little bit warmer. It'll be interesting to see how everything plays out. So, Courtney, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us talking Winnipeg Jets fans. You can follow her on Twitter at Courtney H. Stone. Does a great job covering the Winnipeg Jets for the Hockey Writers. Courtney, thanks for the time today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Really appreciate it. And fans, thank you for joining us here. We'll be back. We've got a couple decisions that we have to make about the show in terms of if we're going to go weekly, if we're going to go every other week. I think we're going to go weekly up to the draft at least. So just stay tuned to Twitter. We'll announce who we're going to have on the show. Still drop new episodes every Thursday. Again, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, Google Play, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. We are all over the place, not just this show here, but all the other shows that we have, and it's constantly growing. So just make sure that you find, subscribe, and like. You will not miss a thing. You will not be bored because there's so much content that is out there. So give it some love. Thank you very much for joining us here. Hope you'll have a great week. By the time we talk next week, we'll be into conference finals. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time here on the Hockey Writers Live.